My name is Steven. I've worked in the field of data for a very long time. I started out as a data analyst at a marketing agency called McCann. I went on to lead Southeast Asia operations at a data provider called YouGov. And then I eventually co-founded a company called Milieu, which is a data SaaS platform that I led for about 6 years. And then I went on to serve as the chief data officer at a fintech. So I've been in the space for a long time. I've hired and built teams of data engineers, data analysts at many different companies around the world, from Singapore to Canada. But I also love to teach. So if you go on platforms like Udemy and also my own website, I have many courses that teach anything from quantitative research to marketing analytics to data visualization. And this is all just kind of a side hustle. I just really love to teach. And I'm going to talk about this a little bit later on, but my latest course is on the right side here with a past colleague of mine, Lisa Schiller, who's a brilliant data scientist and also a big fan of Metabase as well. And she, her and I recently released this course about data storytelling, and Metabase is also heavily featured in that course as well. I also love to write, and I talk about, I have a blog where I write about all things data science, AI, leadership, etc. And wherever you see analytical, that's actually just it's my personal brand. So again, I have a day job, but in the rest of the day, or when I find the time, I create courses, I write a blog, and it's all things data analytics, and data science. So why you're here, though, is to talk about AI-powered workflows for data teams. And I want to start with a story because I've been on both sides of this kind of anecdote, which is you work in a company, maybe it's a mid-sized company to a larger enterprise, and you have a data team that's centralized, and maybe you're a data analyst on that team, and you get that ding from a Slack message or a Teams message, and there's an initial request from a stakeholder or your boss or someone that says, hey, can we pull this data out of our warehouse? Can you help me with this particular question? And then there's also a pile-on. This is something I noticed a lot, which is when someone asks for something, other people are like, oh, I also want this, but can you give me this cut of the data? And can you give me this? And this is something I've seen both as the C-suite, as the kind of chief data officer managing a data team, but also as the analyst myself. And so the challenge for a lot of data teams, especially in larger, mid-size or larger companies, is that you often have a centralized data team, and there'll be like a ticketing system, which is powered by Jira or Notion or whatever your tool is. And so just to organize the kind of steady stream of requests that come in, whether it's a data request or dealing with broken pipelines or things like that, a request will come in, and then someone on your team will create a ticket to manage that ticket, the request. Maybe you get on a scoping call with the requester or your stakeholders to scope out the ticket. Then finally, the analyst can go and write the query, retrieve your data, clean it, build a dashboard, and then you share it with your stakeholder only for them to ask follow-up questions, and you kind of go in this infinite loop. And this is I've designed these exact structures. I'm not saying that this is going to go away. And this is less common in startups, but it's often a necessary evil for mid-sized to larger companies. The problem with this structure that I've often found is that you've got really smart data analysts and data scientists at companies, and many of you are on this call today, so I'm speaking directly to you when I should be speaking to your bosses. But what ends up happening a lot of the time is that you get pulled down by rudimentary requests that should be serviceable by the stakeholders themselves. And this gives you less time to work on the really creative stuff, the more advanced and difficult queries or business questions that require really advanced SQL or Python or things like that. And you get less time for those things that can actually move the needle because you're just bogged down by a volume of basic and rudimentary requests. And I've seen this at multiple companies. And I've tried many times to create ways to boost data literacy or boost people's SQL skills or things like that so that they can answer basic questions. And I've never seen so much progress than I have in the last couple of years with the advent of language AI and the progress we've seen with text to SQL. And what I'm going to show you today is a process that streamlines this, where you're going to be using AI to help write queries and answer questions. And the analyst role is still here to take on harder queries, but also to help with evaluation and verification of questions. And we'll kind of get into this full workflow today. So this is kind of the new structure that we're going to see. So what we're going to cover today is I'm going to briefly talk about the environment. I am using Metabase open source, and I've got it locally installed. I'm not going to go too deep into that because I think that's a kind of an edge case that not a lot of people are going to need, but I will give you a few details on my specific environment. We're going to talk about semantic layers, and we're going to go into Data Studio in Metabase. We're going to introduce you to Metabot and how it works and natural language querying. We'll talk about that both inside of the Metabase UI, and we'll also do it inside of Slack. We'll talk about a Slack workflow and why I think Slack is really great, because even if you're using Metabot inside of Metabase, it's still private. What I like about Slack is that you can bring Metabot into public channels, and it creates some observability for analysts to be able to go in and see what's happening, and also verify queries if they are a little bit more advanced. And we'll talk about that as well. So the importance of verifying and saving queries, building documents. Documents is a newly launched feature a couple months ago, I think, or maybe slightly more, from Metabase. And I really love documents because I love dashboards in Metabase, but I felt that dashboards were too heavy for certain use cases. Like if I needed to do some kind of report, and documents filled a very important or unmet need for me. So I'm a big fan of that. And we'll finish off with some tips and Q&A. So there's a lot to get into. We're already 15 minutes in, so I'm going to push right on in. So first things first, I want to talk about the environment that I'm using. Many of you, if you're Metabase users, you're probably using the fully hosted solution offered by Metabase, or maybe you're using open source and you're hosting yourself in the cloud. Very briefly, I'm just going to walk through how I'm set up. I'm using Metabase, obviously, as our BI stack. I'm running completely locally on my own machine. So I'm doing that through Docker. So Docker is basically used for virtualization. Obviously, we're going to be using Slack. We've deployed Metabot's custom Slack bot, and I'll show you kind of what that looks like later on. And then I'm using Anthropic for inference. But you have a couple of options. I believe Metabase has now rolled out support for OpenRouter. Margaret, you can correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm on a slightly older version of V60 and it's not available in mine yet, but I'm pretty sure you guys have rolled it out. And there's support for ChatGPT coming later. I highly recommend using OpenRouter because it's, one API with multiple models. And you will find that the model really matters. So we're going to come back to that. But in this case, my setup, I'm using Claude Keys. And because I am using a fully locally deployed version, I am using Cloudflare for a tunnel. So just in case anyone is interested in learning Metabase and they're going to deploy locally, if you do want to use Metabot, you have to set up something called a tunnel, because when you have it installed as a local host in your machine, you can send information out. But when Claude responds to your query and sends data back, with localhost, there's nowhere for it to go. So we set up something called a tunnel, which basically exposes your localhost instance to the internet. You could Cloudflare, if you have a domain managed by Cloudflare, it's free to set up tunnels. And I think this is kind of an edge case. I feel like most people won't need to go into this. But if you do, Cloudflare is a great option. There's other providers like ngrok to set up tunnels. But again, I'm not going to go too deep into that. Now, if, again, you are interested in setting up this workflow completely locally, you can scan this QR code or visit this link. If you're scrambling to get your phone right now and you can't get it in time, we will send out the links and the slides after this. But where this goes is where are we here? To a Notion database built specific, or Notion page specifically for this workshop that has a whole bunch of helpful resources for you. So for example, I have the installation guides. These are links directly to Metabase documentation for building your Slack app or even installing Metabase via open source and Docker. I also have some suggested Docker run commands if you're, again, doing this completely offline. This is not going to be needed if you're using a paid subscription to Metabase or if you're hosting in your own network. But I also have some other things here that are useful if you need it, like if you want to set up a proxy. So the Cloudflare proxy, I didn't explain this a minute ago, but what this does is it's not the same as the tunnel. What the proxy does here, it's optional, and it just helps filter the traffic from your Slack app. So when you're making Slack, when you're talking to Metabot in Slack, it's going to be sending out calls to Anthropic or OpenRouter, needs to send them back. And a proxy helps just filter that. It's optional, it's not required, but it can help. This is just about tuning your implementation to make it as efficient as possible. There's a troubleshooting guide. I've even included in this document a prompt you can use with AI, which will give it all the context of this specific setup. So it basically says, hey, you're an expert full stack engineer. I'm using Metabase open source. I am using Cloudflare for tunnels, blah, 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 and I need your help to debug. So this is going to be useful if you, again, are new to Metabase and or you're using a locally installed version of it and you want to debug or troubleshoot with AI. Just take this prompt and paste it into your AI of choice, and it'll instantly know, okay, you're using Metabase version 60 open source, and it'll be ready to start answering your questions. You might need to modify this prompt if you've made any changes to your setup. And finally, I have a little implementation guide. So this is going to be useful for anyone who is really interested in getting into the nuts and bolts of a locally deployed version of Metabase. So that is there for you if you need it. But we are going to jump into the workshop now. So I am going to walk you through a few steps. I am going to very briefly show Docker, but we're not going to spend a lot of time here. Again, if you are new to Docker, it's basically just a virtualization environment for you to run almost like a cloud version of Metabase right on your own computer. And Metabase make it super easy. Even if you're not a technical person, to get this up and running, you can literally just go to images and search for Metabase and pull the latest version, which is going to be version 60. And then you'll spin up a container from there to basically deploy your locally hosted version of Metabase. So this is all very straightforward, or it's pretty simple. There's a lot of data folks on the call, so I imagine most of you are probably going to be a little bit technical. What I do want to show you, though, is a few steps involved in the setup. So I have a persistent container here that I'm going to demo later on. What I'm going to do first, though, is I'm going to create a temporary container here. So I'm just going to run this on port 3013. This is going to spin up a new container with like a fresh install. And I just want to show you a few things real fast that are going to be important here. So where are we? There we are. Blue Meninsky is our newly installed version. So this is like a fresh install of Metabase. Nobody else can see this or access it. This is all completely on my own computer. And I'm just going to go in and give it some basic information. So we're going to sign up. Oops. Analytical. I'm just going to give, test 1, 2, 3, 4. Test 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Now, the other thing I should mention is that for the sake of this demo, I'm not connecting to an external database. This is all going to be done with the sample database, which again, if you're new to Metabase, I really love this about Metabase. They ship with a really cool sample database with multiple tables, like a transaction ledger, a customer table. And if you're learning data science or you're learning SQL or data visualization, it's fantastic because it gives you a really good learning sandbox to play with data. I am not going to connect to a database. Typically you would. So I'm just going to continue with the sample data here. And we're going to click finish and take me to Metabase. Okay, this is a fresh install of Metabase. Now, if you are going to be building the Slack workflow, there's a couple things you need to do first. One is click over here on the right side and go to admin, and you're going to go to AI here, and you're going to select your provider. And again, I believe on the newest version, I think OpenRouter is already available. And you'll just go to OpenRouter, or you'll go to Anthropic to the developer platform and create a new key, and you'll add it in here. So For example, if I'm using Anthropic, you just get your key, plug it in here, click connect, and it will show a little green symbol that says it is connected, and you're basically good to go. So that's step one, is go to AI section, the AI section in admin, and set this up. And there's another very important thing here that I'm going to circle back to later, which is, apologize, it's ghosted out right now. But here is where you tell Metabot what they have access to. So you can see enable Metabot. It should be enabled by default once you add your key. Now the default is our analytics, which is really everything. It's the default folder that everyone has access to, where everything gets saved that's not in a personal collection in Metabase. And I highly recommend that, depending on your size of company, but I really think for any company, you should create a more specific collection that's curated with your best queries, your best dashboards, your highest quality queries. Because if you give Metabot access to everything, and this isn't just Metabot, if you give a large language model that is going to be doing text to SQL or natural language querying to a really big warehouse with like 100 schemas or 1,000 databases or 5,000 tables, it's going to really struggle with, even with a really rich semantic layer, it is going to struggle to traverse all of that information and run in a performance-oriented way that gets you data that doesn't cost a lot of money through token usage and which gets you responses quickly. So I'm going to come back to this a little bit later on, but you do want to care about this. What are you giving Metabot access to? Everything versus a curated set of data inside of a Metabase collection. So this is our initial setup. And by the way, you can also configure MCPs if you want. So if you want to be able to talk to Metabase from your other tools, like from within Claude or something like that, you can use the MCP. But right now, we're going to be focusing on using Metabot with our own API keys. Now, the other thing you want to do is under settings, you need to deploy your Slack app. And it's pretty straightforward. If you go to Slack, you're going to need to click on Create Slack App. You are going to need admin access to your Slack workspace. So if you're at a company, you're going to need to do this, a company with like a networking or IT team, you're going to need to do this with them if you don't have admin access. The process to create the Slack app is pretty straightforward. You're going to click Create Slack App. You'll choose your workspace that you will deploy to. Click Next. It'll give you, you can edit the configuration here. So this is basically a code base for the Slack app. It should be pretty straightforward. You can click Create. And I've created the Slack app here. And you're going to need some of this information here, like the secret, the signing secret, etc. But keep in mind, though, is that it's not installed into Slack until you go to Install App and click Install into your workspace. So when you click this, that is when you are going to find Metabot appear here under Apps. And the first time you add Metabot, you're going to have to just do an authentication for Metabot. So I'm not going to go through the installation here. The steps are pretty straightforward. And like I mentioned before, in my package here that I'll include as a takeaway, there is a great documentation from the Metabase team on how to deploy this Slack app. But like I said, if you're working in an organization that has a managed Slack workspace, you're probably going to need to work with your IT networking team to get this up and running. So I'm going to close this. So those are the main steps to get your AI Metabot up and running, and the basic and the steps to get Metabot into Slack. And once you've done all this, once you've added your API keys, you will notice that you can start talking to Metabot. Now, I didn't add my API keys, so Metabot is not here, but I'm going to switch over now to my production environment. So I'm going to close this, and I'm going to open up Docker. And we're going to, I'm actually going to turn this off here. Okay, so I have another Docker container for my Metabase, which is at my own domain here. There it is. Okay, so now, again, you will notice, if I just go back to admin for a brief minute, you'll see, okay, here I have added my API key. I can also choose the model that I want to work with. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about this later, but the model really matters. You can if you're using OpenRouter and you're getting access to a lot of different models, that's great. You will want to experiment with different models. in the context of Claude, I can tell you right now that Sonnet is a great option, and I would highly recommend going with Sonnet or a mid-tier model. For example, Haiku, again, in the context of Anthropic, I generally find is not going to be smart enough to deal with some of the types of queries you might want to ask it. And your semantic layer matters here. The size of your schemas and tables matter. But Haiku generally doesn't perform too well. But on the other side, Opus is going to eat tokens for lunch. So if you have Opus on here, it's overkill. It's going to drive up usage. It's going to eat way too many tokens. And you're going to find that you're just paying way too much or paying more with inference than you need to. So Sonnet is a good option for Claude. But whether you're using Claude, ChatGPT, or even open source models, make sure that you experiment with different things, but go for mid-tier models. Don't go for things that are optimized for just speed, but don't go for things that are like thinking models that are just way too heavy and inefficient. And you can see here are the settings for you to choose a different folder for Metabot. So what I want to start with here is I want to talk about the semantic layer, the importance of the semantic layer, and the functionality that you have access to inside of Metabase. So most of you probably already know what a semantic layer is. If you're new to the idea of a semantic layer, what it is essentially a human readable description of your data that is understandable by humans, but also understandable by AI. And this is really, really important because the easier you make this for your AI model, the more performance-oriented it's going to be. So where we are going to manage our semantic layer inside of Metabase is inside of a newly launched suite called Data Studio. And again, this is all free and available in the open source version with some caveats. So we're going to click on this little option over here. We're going to click on Data Studio. And you'll notice that wherever you see an icon like this, that means it's behind a paywall. So I don't have access to some of these features. Everything I'm demoing to you today is completely available in the open source version of Metabase, which I think is really cool. And the good news is that the essential features are all inside of the free tier. There are some really cool features like the dependency graph. I love this stuff, like being able to visualize your schemas. I really love these kind of things. And this is a really cool feature. You've got some diagnostic functionality here. So there are some really cool features inside of the paid plan. But like I said, the essential things that you're going to need to maintain your semantic layer are all in the free plan. We're going to start with tables here. So if you click on tables, let me open up another, let me jump out here. Okay. This is Metabase. Okay, so let me just jump to a table here. And again, remember, we're using the sample database, and we'll go to orders. So this is what the orders table looks like. It's pretty simple. We've got a primary key here for order ID. Every row here is a different transaction or order. And then we've got a column for different information, like the user who placed the order, the product, the amounts, the date and time that it was created, etc. Now, you'll notice that there's some interesting things happening here that you may not see in a vanilla setup of Metabase. It's in the out-of-the-box setup for the sample database, but if you hook up your own warehouse or your own tables, it's not going to look like this out of the box. And you're going to need to configure some of these things. So for example, if I scroll over this, you'll see here that it has a nice little summary. And you also notice it's got some other cool things here. It shows the summary of that table, and it's got a min and max here. And you might also notice here, the product ID, the base value in my table here is actually a number. It's an integer. It's pulling in this text string from a relational table. And all this is unlocked in the functionality under tables here inside of Data Studio. And so let's go into tables here. Let's go to orders. And when you click on orders, you're going to see table details. So here's the first thing that you want to keep an eye out for, which is you can add short descriptions to your tables. This is like the front line of your semantic layer, because some of your tables might be straightforward. It's called orders, or maybe you have some abstract name, or it's just like not very human readable. So this is where you can add a description that is beneficial both for humans, like you might have a newly hired person who's getting access to Metabase and looking through your tables, and they can read about these descriptions and learn about what the table is. So it's good for humans. It's also good for AI. So in this case, the orders is a table that shows or stores confirmed orders for products from users for our sample fake company here. So this is, again, you can just type in whatever you want here. And this is one example of building out a semantic layer. We are just labeling our tables. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go into fields here. Now, what you're seeing here are all the different columns that are inside of our table. We already saw the orders table here. But what you're also seeing is descriptions of each of these columns here. This is the second layer of building out, or the second aspect of building out our semantic layer. We're adding descriptions, and Metabot will use these. When it goes through the data frame and it starts to make sense and unpack the query, the natural language query you write, it's going to be paying attention to keywords that you give it, and it's going to be linking these up to things like table and column descriptions, because these things help it find information inside of your database. This is even more important if you have a really scaled database. So building out, adding in these descriptions, and you'll also notice that you can click on each of these fields and completely customize what is happening. So, or defining what kind of information is in it. So is this an integer? Is it text? Is it a date? All that stuff. You can also define what kind of field type it is. Is this a primary key or entity key? Is it a location? Is it an income amount? So this stuff, when you connect your Snowflake database or your Postgres database or whatever it is, it's really important that you go through and map all these things out. Now, sometimes you do this at the database layer. You might even do this inside of Snowflake, or you can do it inside of Metabase. And there are just really powerful tools here for you to be able to go in and map all this stuff out. And you can even create relationships. So for example, user ID here is mapped to an ID in another table called people. So you can create these relationships. And this is beneficial both for the user experience. Like, this creates a better UI and experience for your users of Metabase, because again, they can go into this table and they can scroll over these and be like, okay, product ID is related to this, and it's a foreign key that relates to another table. But it also helps ensure that your AI model can create connections in your database. So semantic layer, the real magic happens under tables and describing your tables and columns. But you can also utilize these things, which are segments and measures. Segments are essentially segments, customer base, like customers with special filters that you use often. So for example, under people, I've created a couple segments based on their joining cohort. And what this does is it gives you easy access to these within the platform. So if I go to the people database, you'll notice that now that I've created those segments, here they are. They're just, you could build these through filters, through a couple of clicks, but by building out these segments, they're already available to you. But by creating these segments and labeling them nicely, you're giving increased power, or you're creating better attention for the model to be able to find information or common segments or measures that you use. The same thing goes for measures. So if you don't have measures set up, they're basically derived metrics. So if you have common metrics like net retention revenue, where you're dividing one metric into another, you can go in and create these so that they're available to you to put in your visualizations in your tables, but they will also be there so that if someone asks a question and asks for a custom measure that's not stored in your database, you can retrieve it. Your AI model can retrieve it because it will look inside of the measures that are available. So this is some steps you can take to build up your semantic layer inside of Data Studio. The other thing I want to mention is glossary. So glossary is also very valuable because it just provides additional metadata that can be used by Metabot to connect dots and find information in your tables and in your databases. So this is really helpful if you have people that use different language or different ways to refer to your data. So for example, we have an orders database, but let's say your CEO always says transactions. In that case, you can add a definition here for transactions or other things like MRPU, et cetera. And this just makes Metabot smarter, and it helps it understand where to look for certain data. So that is the semantic layer that we're going to talk about. Building out semantic layers can go even deeper than this, but these are, I think, the table stakes, the things you really have to get right, which is basically describing your data so that your AI model can find information efficiently and get you good quality answers. What I want to switch to now is show you how you can actually start using Metabot. So we have Metabot here, and I'm just going to start talking to it. And remember, it's using my own API keys, which is in this case, Sonnet from Claude. So how many orders did we receive in March 2026? And Metabot's going to get to work on that. Now, you have to understand, Metabot is the speed at which it works is going to be related to the model you choose, as well as the size of your database and the semantic layer. So out of the box, it's not like you're going to see Metabot does work quite well, even with a like the lack of a semantic layer. But the more you build up these things, the better it's going to perform. But like I said, if you have a really scaled data warehouse, then you have to make some decisions about what you're going to give Metabot access to. Now, I've just asked a question to Metabot here. The thing you have to keep in mind with Metabase is that it's created this query here, and it's not saved by default. It's not like it stores it somewhere by default. So if I leave this page here, as long as I have this window open, I can get back to it by clicking this link. But if I close this and leave, it's gone forever. So what you always want to do is start saving queries that you run. And what I generally like to do is queries that I know are fairly basic, I'll start saving them into my own collection or into a shared folder with my team. Or if I need to check them, I have a verification collection and I will save it in here. Now, once it is saved here, I can easily get back to it by going into my collections and getting to my verified collection. And I can go in here, I can retrieve that query. I can also go in and see how it built it using either the question editor, or I can also check the SQL to see how it was built out. Now, verifying queries is really important, especially if you start having the rest of your team starting to run queries. It's not so much that Metabase or Metabot will get it wrong, but often there are differences in assumptions. So for example, if I ask Metabot, how many orders did we have in the past 7 days? And you don't define or declare specifically how it should retrieve that data, it'll make some assumptions and pull that data. But you'll find that there might be differences depending on whether you want it to go from midnight to midnight, in a 7-day time span, or go from 2 p.m. to 2 p.m. So there's all kinds of little details that may not have been included in the initial query that Metabot will make some assumptions for. And so that's why I think it's very good practice to have a verify collection where you can go in and double check things and make some tweaks to queries that are being asked. So that is a quick example of Metabot inside the UI. And again, you can retrieve visualizations as well. So show me a time series of orders on a daily basis in March 2026. And Metabot will basically work on this and return a chart for me based on what I've asked for. So, and there we go. It's just returned exactly what I wanted. I wanted March 2026, and there's our order volume. So what I want to do now is, though, I want to switch over to Slack and show you some examples here. So Metabot has now been deployed inside Slack. There are 2 ways you can talk to Metabot. One is if you go into apps here, you can click on Metabot here, and you can talk to Metabot from here without having to actually @mention it. So if you just ask a question here, it will start asking a question. Or you can go and invite it into a channel. So you'll have to @mention it first. It'll be invited into the channel. And then you can go and say @Metabot, how many orders in the first week of March 2026? And Metabot will always reply in inside a comment thread. So it's going to get to work on that. And like I said, here you will have to @mention Metabot. But if you want to have a one-on-one conversation with Metabot, you do not need to @mention it from here. You can essentially just go and ask it questions and get responses back. The benefit of using Metabot inside Slack is that, especially if it's in a shared channel, is that you can invite your team. So you could either have a single Slack channel that's called Metabot and everyone can go in and ask questions, or you can have like, sprint specific or project specific channels where you invite a small team and they can start asking questions and getting answers to those. But the reason why I like this approach is it creates transparency to your data experts, because I do think that it's important for your data team to still go in and check these questions and verify them to make sure that all the assumptions were correct. So usually what I will do is, as people go in and ask questions for the ones that they really care about, we can go in and you can access all the queries that they've written, and you'll be able to click on these links and it'll bring you directly to that query. You can save it and you can verify it. And once it's verified, you can move it into a verified folder or something like that. So this is why I really like Slack, because it creates this kind of community where you can all ask questions and benefit from Metabot, but you can also, it allows your data experts to be able to have some layer of transparency into the questions that are being asked, and also get in and make some changes if there needs to be changes. The last thing I wanted to show was taking the questions from, say, a Slack channel and putting it into a curated document. And this is where documents come in. So in this case, I've created a collection and I have, let's see here. So I had my to verify collection, which are queries that other people wrote that I want to double check and verify. And once I've verified them, I can move them into a production collection. And so an example of this is here, I've checked all of these different queries and I created a document. So if you are new to Metabase Documents, when you click on new here, you can create questions, which is drag and drop, UI-based querying. You can write SQL from scratch. You can build dashboards. And dashboards have been around in Metabase for a long time. They're great. This is where you can create your persistent dashboards where you can have filters, and these don't change as much. But the thing I really love is this new feature called Documents. It's kind of like a living document where you can say, Feb report, and it's kind of like this Notion style interface where you can just start pulling in queries and curating things and adding custom analysis. So you can add supporting text. This is supporting analysis. And usually what I like to do is people in a channel, like maybe we're running a sprint and people are asking questions and maybe they're all rallying around a specific use case. Like, hey, we saw a dip in performance in March. Why did it happen? And so the analyst can start verifying queries and adding them into a curated documents. And let me show you, I've created a sample document here. The documents, again, I'm a big fan of this because dashboards are great, but generally I see dashboards as things that shouldn't change as much. You build it once, you build in all those filters and splicers, and then you don't change it that often. Maybe you make quarterly updates or something, but the idea is self-serve with dashboards. What I find documents are really great for is like short curating of data for ad hoc analysis. So instead of just sending them links, your stakeholders, links to like 15 different charts and then pasting it into PowerPoint or something, a document is like a living document, and you can just keep adding to it and say, okay, add another chart here. Or you can even talk to Metabot right within the document. So you can add new charts, you can add supporting analysis, you can write text, you can format it. And I have used documents a lot, again, as a way to power ad hoc analysis. And I find that they're a little bit more, they're not documents that will stand forever. Like dashboards are things that you will keep for a long time. Documents are really serving a near-term need, and once you're done with it, you can archive them or save them in a collection to retrieve later on. But if you haven't tried out the documents feature yet, I think it's very, very good. And I think it's very conducive to a Slack workflow where you have Metabot in a channel and your analyst is curating those the best pieces of that analysis of these questions, putting them into a document, and then sharing the document with the team as like a postmortem or as a summary of all those insights. And also keep in mind, you can print this Why would you need to print it? I don't know. I don't even have a printer anymore. But you can create public links. Keep in mind that public links are exposed to the internet. So do be cautious with this. But there's lots of great ways to share this with people either within your organization or externally. So I'm going to wrap up with a couple of quick tips. First and foremost, and these recommendations are for local setups. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but optimize your Docker container. I added some additional variables to my localhost setup that gives me more granular log data. So you can enable that by using this command in your Docker run, which just creates more detailed logs. So if you're ever trying to debug anything on an open source install, this is really helpful. And I also tuned my container to maximize the amount of RAM that's being allocated to my Metabase setup. So again, only things if you really want to geek out on a custom setup. So enabling logs, check your API usage. This is going to be very important. For example, if you're using Claude, the tier 1 limits are not going to be enough. So you're going to have to get to at least tier 2 or tier 3 limits on the Claude API because it really caps you at the input and output token caps. So in order to get to tier 2, you just need to top up, I think it's like $50, and it's maybe like 80 or 100 of pre-bought credits to get to tier 3. But whether you're using OpenRouter or Claude, you need to make sure that you are aware of the usage limits because you might be seeing queries fail or inefficiency because your input token limits or your output token limits or requests per minute are just too low. So keep an eye out for this. Generally, when you're debugging issues, again, an open source setup, you'll be looking at Metabase logs in Docker, but you'll also be looking at your usage logs inside of OpenRouter or Claude. And set up a proxy. If you're installing Metabase either on your own machine or you're using open source on your own servers, proxies can help you filter and control the requests that are being sent out of Slack to your API, your AI model API. This is just more about tuning your setup and customizing your implementation to really maximize performance. But I do find that it is important to really customize and tailor your setup. Where I wanted to end here was a couple of general tips. And the first is you really need to invest time in building up your semantic layer. If you haven't done this already, you really want to go in and build and enrich this setup either in Metabase, ideally, or perhaps even in your warehouse, whether you're using Snowflake or whatever. Because the more you describe your data, the better your AI model is going to be able to find data in your warehouse. And this is especially true if you have a really scaled database. Choose your model wisely. Do not just set the model and never change it. If you're doing this for the first time, benchmark. Get a series of prompts or quick queries that you deem as easy, medium, and hard, and run those inside of Metabot or in Slack via Metabot with different models and just observe the performance and choose a model that you find suits best. With Claude, I have found consistently Sonnet is the way to go. Haiku is generally not smart enough. Opus is just way too expensive. Sonnet's a good mid-tier model, and like Sonnet is a good way to go. Give Metabot focus. Really do not think about what you're giving access to. If you're using Metabase in particular, create a collection that houses your best models, your best queries, highest quality queries, your best dashboards and all that stuff, because it will just perform so much better if it can find existing things rather than having to write new queries. Metabot is great at writing new queries, but you don't have to reinvent the wheel with every question. If there was already a question that someone answered 6 months ago that just requires a new filter or something, Metabot can find those older queries and say, here's something for you. And I think that's really powerful. It's not all about writing brand new queries. Sometimes it's about finding stuff that already exists. Verify your query output. I think this is kind of the new role for the analyst in this setup. So hopefully you're having less time working on rudimentary queries, but you will want to make sure that you have a process to verify queries just to double check some of the stuff that's happening with your team who are asking questions. Basic queries like how many orders do we have is probably not going to need to be verified. But if you're seeing people asking intermediate to complex questions, you might just want to go in and check to make sure that the filters that Metabot applied were correct. And like I said, consider query complexity. If you need to write a query that has complex table joins across 3 tables and CTEs and window functions and all that stuff. Again, that's something I would say Metabot could potentially do, but that's the kind of thing that I think your skilled data scientist analyst should work on, while ensuring that the rest of the team, the non-data savvy folks, can self-serve. So think about these kind of things, like what are you focusing, what are you giving to Metabot versus what are you getting your data experts to actually work on. That is it for today's session. We've got a few minutes for Q&A. I just want to mention too that I mentioned this at the beginning, but Lisa and I, my former colleague, recently launched a really great course all about data visualization and storytelling. We teach a little bit of SQL. We heavily feature Metabase throughout the course, but we also talk about some other data visualization tools as well. And if you're interested in learning more about that course, please scan the QR code and you can learn more about it. So I'm going to switch over here and allow for some Q&A. If we don't have time to get to all the questions, we can follow up after and send an email out with some of those responses.